to add a little bit about climate resiliency and talk about plants and climate change a little bit, and just acknowledge that climate changes may end up influencing the distribution of certain plant species in the future. We're still studying this and seeing what plants are moving where and how they're moving. I know there's different studies that have been done. And also our weather patterns are changing too and are going to be much more variable with greater extremes, which are going to make it difficult for some plant species to handle those changes. And a great example of this is actually happening in the Santiam Canyon that we had been seeing probably over the past 5 years. We've been seeing a lot of Douglas fir trees dying in the Santiam Canyon, and it's suspected that they are not able to handle the wetter winters and the flooding and then the extreme drought and heat in the summertime that we've been seeing. That kind of goes with the next statement, that plant species can differ in their tolerance of an ability to adapt to changing climate patterns. So Douglas fir is definitely one of those species that we're seeing struggling in some places. And another one we're seeing starting to struggle too is western red cedar. It's been documented that several of those fully grown, established, mature trees are starting to die in the landscape. And it's probably because of drought. They're not used to the heat and the prolonged periods of dryness that we've been having the past few summers. So we're going to need to be more strategic on where we're planting some of these species that seem to be not tolerating the heat or the drought. And maybe those are going to end up needing to be planted more closer to streams and waterways where they can get more water year round. And then we also need to think about those disturbances like drought and fire and insect outbreaks and how they are going to contribute to the cause of vegetation changes. And then those disturbances can cause an increase in invasive species, which can also alter the vegetation and compete for resources with those native plants. But there's still a lot to learn, and I know there's a lot of research going on, so this is kind of a stay tuned and pay attention to your yard and what's happening in your yard, and just think about the impacts and really be cognizant of if you're planting native species, make sure that you're trying to think years ahead and what their resources might need. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about what is a native plant or what is native. And generally, those are plants that are found to occur in our area before European settlement and usually within a particular ecoregion. And those ecoregions are areas that have similar ecosystems and the same sort of resources within them. So essentially, we are in the Willamette Valley ecoregion and are bounded by the Coast and Klamath and Cascade ranges, which are also separate ecoregions. A little bit about the benefits of native plants. They help provide clean, cool water that's important to salmon and other native aquatic species that live in our area. Those plants can help filter out pollution and contaminants and provide shade for the water. It also helps provide wildlife and pollinator habitat. I added the pollinator piece in there because they are also equally as important as wildlife. And they provide this food and help support those native species. It's also important, they're also important for erosion control. The native plants usually have deeper and more substantial root masses than a lot of our invasive plants, so that helps to control erosion along streams. And then native plants are pretty resilient. They're adapted to our climate and different pests and diseases that are in our area. And if you kind of think about the plants in our area have to survive some pretty extreme weather conditions with extremely wet and saturated soils in the winter and hot and very dry with little to no moisture in the summer months. So just having, that balance and being able to withstand those differences is pretty amazing. A little bit more about the benefits of native plants. A lot of times they require less care and maintenance because they are adapted to our local conditions. They've evolved without the use of a lot of supplemental water in the summertime and without the use of additional fertilizer or pesticides. Ideally, the inputs will be minimal after establishment. So once those plants have been growing for 3 to 5 years, you really shouldn't need to give them much in the way of water or nutrients. They can survive on their own. Usually we do recommend to water occasionally for the first 2 to 3 years in the summertime until plants are established. And don't also forget that native plants are very beautiful. And back to the comment about providing plants that bloom throughout the year, this handy table that is on the Marion SWCD website, this shows a variety of native plants and shows the time of year that they flower and the colors that their flowers are. This is one side of the page for flowering plants, and then the other side of the page shows trees and shrubs, a list of plants not preferred by deer. So I found a couple different publications that had some information on it, but there's always the caveat of if deer are hungry enough, they will eat almost anything. So you'll notice that Western serviceberry is on this list. So I think it just depends on how hungry animals are and if you have a variety of other things that they could eat. And just remember that deer and elk are browsers too, so they usually take a little bit of something and then kind of move along.